Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello, and welcome back to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. Welcome back. We are so excited to have you back. And today we are doing high cortisol part 2. If you didn't see or listen to our first episode, be sure to go back and listen to our first episode on this topic, high cortisol part 1. And in that, we really talk about what is high cortisol, cortisol dysregulation in general. We talked about signs and symptoms, kind of more normal protocols that people often follow, why they often don't work. We talked about testing. So be sure to go check that out. And today we're really going to dive deep into how do you actually learn how to regulate your cortisol? What does that often involve? And what are some things, especially in our practice, that we really look at? And once again, Shannon and I have a ton of experience with this personally, because we dealt with these and we did all the things that don't work, and we also did all the things that did work, and we're in a much better place now. And we also see this with all of our clients. So we want to share all of these things and dive deeper into all of these things and give you more information as far as how do we actually regulate cortisol and everything that we really need to look at that goes into that. We're going to talk about nervous system regulation in that. We will also probably do a totally separate episode on nervous system regulation because there is so much to cover with that, but we'll talk about some basics today. We're going to talk about working out with high cortisol or cortisol dysregulation issues in general, both while you're healing and also from a longer term standpoint, and how to manage that. And then we'll kind of wrap up, and this will lead us right into that, into maintenance. How do you maintain normal cortisol levels, especially in a world where big events, big stressors are going to come up? It's going to happen. It's a natural part of life. And what are some things that we can do to really make sure we take care of our bodies when those things come up so that we don't end up back in a really bad, very dysregulated space? And we'll go over lifestyle things, nutrition, movement. We'll go over, some supplements that you may want to think about. We'll go over all of that here. So, super excited for this. This is obviously, once again, near and dear to our hearts. Let's just dive right in. And Shannon, if you want to start, let's just look at big picture, why. So these supplement protocols that people go on don't work, and the biggest reason is they're looking at such a small piece of the puzzle. And when we look at this, we look at all of the stressors. So let's dive into this piece.
Yeah. So I think starting by saying it's really important to remember that mind and the body are connected. So that's why one big reason we can't just take supplements that are going to support our adrenals and then expect it to fix our cortisol regulation. So much more to it than that. And we live in a world, you just touched on this, but there's so many stressors around us. So we have our external stress or just our own personal stress that's going on in life. We also have a ton of toxins around us and we can't get away from it. It's our environment. It is what it is. So, but when it comes to the point where it's an overload in the body, as far as different things, general toxin overload. But when I say that, I mean things like parasites, heavy metals, it could be mold, just regular chemical exposure. There's so many different things. So those things alone, when we have that toxin overload or imbalance in our body, is causing stress on it. And it's going to prevent us from making it easier, I guess you could say, or making it easier to regulate your cortisol levels. So it's really important that we have to address it from kind of 3 points, actually. So you touched on this too, the nervous system regulation point, which is kind of the mental health point, the toxin overload point, and just taking care of your body too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the analogy that I like to give, and I did not make this up, so I'm not taking credit for it, but I like to use this analogy. It is used pretty across the board among practitioners here. But this idea of a stress bucket, where we have this bucket, and basically it's everything, every stress that is going on in our life, and we have, some of the things that are uncontrollable, work stress, family stress, general life stress, like so that's a certain amount in the bucket, and often we don't have a lot of control over that. So maybe it's a little bit sometimes, maybe it's a whole lot, a lot of the time. And so it's like, what else can we take out of the bucket? And so other things that fill up this bucket, toxins. Like you can clean living helps, changing your products, water intake. Like if you can't eat organic, you're still being exposed to toxins, just a heads up on your food. Even if you are eating organic, just it's inescapable. And, um, we can end up with dysfunction in our body, and we'll dive deeper into this in just a second here. But if our body's not able to manage the level of toxins for a variety of reasons, stress, chronic stress being a big one, that can add a really big layer of stress to this bucket. And then we can add gut overgrowth, nutrient deficiencies. We add like stomach acid production, like low stomach acid production, immune system, getting sick, like all of these things just start to pile up and pile up. And then, the nervous system we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but or in a little bit probably. But we look at trauma. We look at, are you in a chronic state of fight, flight, freeze response? Are you able to mentally and emotionally decompress and regulate that stress? Most people it's not, which is where the nervous system dysregulation comes into play. And then we look at like food. What kind of food are you eating? Are you nourishing your body? Are we eating a lot of sugar or a lot of, dyes and other things that can cause stress in our body? Water intake. Is your body dehydrated? That's super stressful. So we're just like keep adding onto this bucket. And if you've got cortisol dysregulation issues, your bucket's too full. And so just like stressing the adrenals is like teeny tiny
Yeah.
little piece of the bucket. And that is not going to cut it for the vast majority of people. Now, if your bucket is the tiniest bit full, maybe it'll help for a short amount of time. However, that is not the case for the vast majority of people. And so we got to really take some of these things out of this bucket so that we have room for normal day and life stressors that we don't have control over. And we can control a lot of these things, which is where, the toxin overload. So let's dive deeper into the toxin overload piece of this. Toxin overload, kind of two parts to this. One is exposure. And you're probably you're probably a little bit more into this than I am. But let's talk about products. Like, let's talk about where we're getting a lot of these things from.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say everywhere because I don't want to be that person. But if I'm being realistic, just especially, so let me back up. If you live like, I live in a city right now, and I know that I'm heavily being exposed to way more things than I would be if I was like maybe living in a little bit more secluded area, just from like, there's tons of cars driving around, pollutants in the air from different businesses. So there's like that side of things. And then, of course, like, what are the products that you're using in your home, on your body, your skincare, your hair care products? I mean, I know you talked about food a little bit, but like, what oils are you cooking with? What kind of food are you eating? Like, there's so many different things. Air quality, huge thing. Yeah, I know this is like, for anyone listening, when you hear this, it's really tough to be like stop and like you want to look at all your stuff and feel like, oh, I need to switch it out. Like right now, I want to get on top of this. That is not the case. I don't want to put that message out there to make you think that, because that's going to make you more stressed out. From personal experience, and I know Megan is going to say this too. I mean, it has taken me like, I kind of choose like big things like once a year to switch out. And it's taken me like 4 years to get to where I am now. It took me a full year just to switch out all my makeup products. So like, please, if you're listening to this, don't feel like you need to like run and switch everything out. You maybe start to dabble in it a little bit, but it's going to take time to get there. And this goes even as deep into like the furniture that's in your house, the throw pillows, the blankets, the rugs, like all of these things have chemicals that are sprayed on them. So it's just so easy for us to be exposed.
Yeah, and obviously we're in line with this because we talk about this all the time. And the way I really have done it in my life is like, especially with products, is once I'm done with the product, I switch it out. And I choose to buy a quote unquote cleaner version or less toxic version when I run out of it. And for, cleaning products are big ones, cookware,
Mm.
as well, just a couple other things. Like if you're using a nonstick pan, it's probably a good idea to switch that out. Especially like switch out one or two pans, the ones you use the most. Stainless steel, cast iron, ceramic, like those are going to be better options for you.
Yep.
And if you feel overwhelmed by this, we also have a resource page. If you go under our websites under my faves, so it's trifectacollective.net, we will put it in the show notes, and you go to my faves, I have a little resource. We have a little resource there for you with some recommendations. This is not an exhaustive list. This is not every clean brand out there. This is just giving you some suggestions and a starting point to start working on some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, cleaning products was a pretty quick one for me. Makeup and other products did take definitely some time. With that, another pretty quick one for me were fragrances.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big one. And I didn't realize this until I started making the switch. And then I would smell like fake chemicals or the chemical smells. And man, I mean, so different when you're out of that environment. And we're talking candles, we're talking plugins, we're
Oh,
talking like sprays, perfumes, like anything that has a fragrance to it, any of your products that have a fragrance to it, we really want to try and swap those out. Like just unplugging your little plug-in smells will make a big difference. And that's a pretty easy one to start with.
yeah.
But now if I have a candle or anything and it's or I smell it, if I go when I travel and I go to Airbnbs, if they have I can smell the plugins immediately and I have to go and take them out because I notice like sinus issues start immediately. I'll often get a headache because it smells so much like a chemical now that I've been out of it and my body's just out of that heavy toxin load environment. And this is someone I had very, very high aluminum levels and mercury levels were two big things that were really, really big in my health journey. This is also a real sneaky one that I do not think is talked about enough, and that is medication.
Mm.
There are some, I don't know how many, but there are a decent amount of medications. I'll just throw decent amount of medications out there, especially generic versions of things that contain chemicals, particularly aluminum is probably the most common. I was taking generic allergy medication for a decade, and it contained aluminum. And it definitely contributed. I don't think it was the only thing that contributed to my issues, but it definitely played a role that I was ingesting that every single day. So I would highly encourage you if you're taking anything over the counter or prescription, like just take a look. And if it isn't a prescription med, maybe like talk to your doctor about it and just see if there's an alternate version that you can get that doesn't contain these things, just to give your body a little bit of a break.
Yeah. And even, I mean, kind of following on that, just dyes and stuff too. Like even regular, I don't think I can say a brand name on here, but there's lots of medications out there that just have like, and there's alternatives though, it's check the label, read the label, try and avoid, like Megan was saying, like anything with the common heavy metals in it, like aluminum, the dyes, like red dye, yellow dye, that's actually in a lot more than we think, especially if you're taking certain over-the-counter medications like regularly. to help with inflammation. Maybe that will give you
Ah,
there is alternative brands out there that are like dye free and like don't have the heavy metals in it until you can of course address the root issue.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, we would, we would encourage you just like the more you can limit, and once again, this is a slow roll here of like slowly limit your actual exposure, that will go a long way. Yeah, a couple other environmental things, like you mentioned being in a city, for sure being in a city. For me, I live pretty close to a highway. Definitely that's a really big one. I also don't live too far from a golf course. Like that's also another really big one. So things that are just more polluted or use a lot of chemicals, once again, it's don't like up and move, but just being aware of that and looking at your overall exposure to these things can be really valuable to help to start to limit that. So certainly actual exposure and intake of these things plays a big role. The other thing that plays a really big role here, and this is, I mean, this plays such a big role, and I'm going to exclude mold in this because mold is a little different here. But by and large, most people end up with a toxin overload issue, heavy metals, environmental toxins, because their body can't keep up. And one part of that can be absolutely exposure. But the other part is your body just it's doing too many things, particularly your little liver. Your liver does so much, and once again, we're going to do a whole episode on liver detox pathways, and we're going to do like a really deep dive into the liver, and we're mildly obsessed with the liver and everything that it does for us.
Pretty
But
much.
your liver just can't keep up at some point. And it's almost like this stress bucket. It's like your liver's a primary organ that filters anything out of our body that should not be there. And that is across the board. That is, toxins, that is hormones. If you've got excess cortisol, that's extra stress on your liver. It does a lot with blood sugar regulation. Like it does so much for us that if we're not supporting it and if you're taking a lot of medications like or supplements, if you're on a ton of supplements, you're not on liver support, I guarantee you have just really expensive urine and you're not absorbing and actually utilizing the vast majority of the supplements. I mean, I've been on 30, I think 33 was the most amount of supplements I was ever on. And I think about that now and I get really angry. And I'm like, the amount of money I spent on really expensive urine because my body was absolutely not absorbing any or most of those at that point in time. We really limit our supplement intake or recommendations with our clients to like 3 to 6 is like, we really try and limit that because your liver can't handle it with everything else that it's doing. So, liver support goes a really long way with that.
Yeah, and I don't want to dive in too deep on this, but the nice thing is that there's external things that we can do for liver support. It's not all supplementation. Sometimes we need the supplementation because it's stronger, but there are other options as well.
Yeah, and just we'll touch on them just real quick here. So, really like easier things that you can do to start supporting your liver. Castor oil packs is a really big one. It is a fan favorite of ours. You can make your own. There's also pre-made packs, Queen of the Thrones. Yes, we do have a link. That is also the only one that I use because I don't. So it's just a lot messier to do it yourself. I also don't have any desire to like have to lay there and use a heating pad. I like to wear mine in the afternoons and just like I can leave it on and it's totally fine. Dry brushing is good for the lymphatic system, which also supports the liver. Rebounding or jumping up and down, really supportive. And start with like 10 seconds. Doesn't have to be crazy. Epsom salt baths, super, super good. Bath bombs, be very, very careful. Pure Epsom salt with nothing else in it is really great. Sweating, sauna work. We are going to talk about working out, so we're not saying working out to sweat. It's more sweating like the sauna are really valuable tools and lifestyle things that you can add in that are very supportive of the liver.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much touched on all of them. I think like lymphatic massage would be the only other thing or just regular massage even.
Yeah, gets things moving. So,
Yeah.
and so that's just very supportive of the liver and helping it froth out all of these extra things. So, Yeah, toxin overload, really, really big one. And we're gonna do once again a whole other episode on like toxin overload, testing, all that kind of stuff. If you've been exposed to mold, I'll just throw this out there. Mold is very complicated. We will do many episodes on it. But if you've been exposed to mold in your house, in your work, um, and you're experiencing chronic health issues, that's playing a big role. And you can do all of the adrenal support, all of the gut support that you want ever, and it won't be until you address the mold that your body will be able to heal. And that it's so big. We see it a lot. We see it missed all of the time, even for people who've been in the holistic health world. And just to help you understand with the mold piece, Western medicine, you're going to be so hard pressed to find anyone who is familiar with and or believes in. The studies are out there. The studies are good when it comes to mold illness, mold toxicity, and everything that comes along with it. They're just not trained in this. In the holistic health world, I don't know of a single program out there that does a deep dive into mold for an initial program. You almost always you have to do other additional education specifically around mold to become very, very familiar with mold. And everything that comes along with mold, because mold is never just mold. There's a lot of things that come along with it. And so I also want people to understand, like, even if you're working with a functional medicine practitioner of any sort or holistic health person, there's a good chance they may not be familiar with and or properly trained in mold and how to get mold out of the body and everything that comes along with addressing mold. It's not just take a binder. That will not work. And I've just, especially in the last like few weeks, we've had so many people come to us. I've talked to so many people that they're like, yeah, just take this binder, like you'll be fine. That is not how getting mold out of the body works. That is not how you heal for mold toxicity or mold illness. Shannon has more experience personally with this. I've never had mold issues. Very, very lucky. So it's a big deal and it's very complicated.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's just missed so often. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, there's just, and I think people are becoming more aware of it now and kind of like seeking more education on it, which is great because we need to, especially in places like, I mean, I'm in Texas right now and I cannot tell you how I started listening to like different podcasts and like there's different lawyers who are dedicated here to fighting mold cases because it's so prevalent in Texas. Like it's such a common thing. We'll dive in more on that stuff in the mold episode, but yeah, it's I dealt with it firsthand. There's a lot that goes in with it, lots of other things. It's never just by itself. There's always things that are coupled with it, and it does take much longer to heal from, but that can be, if you have that, a huge stressor on the body that is just like holding you back.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the toxin piece. Now we'll dive into gut overgrowth issues. And here's the thing, like if you have a gut overgrowth issue, and we're gonna wrap them all a little bit in together here. Bacteria, yeast, fungus, and or parasites. If you've got any of these or all of them, depending on the person and who you are, or a combination of these, which is very, very common, couple things that's going to happen. One, you're not absorbing nutrients. You can have the most perfect diet, eat the best, but you're not absorbing your nutrients, which is going to be stressful on the body. There's also some other reasons why and how they got there, which are also stressful on your body. Low stomach acid production is a huge piece of that. But if you have any of these gut overgrowths, just an overgrowth of anything is stressful. You're not going to get your nutrients, particularly things like Candida in particular releases toxins continuously into the body. So that's another toxin piece. And once again, I don't think that's talked about very often. Of just like, if you've got Candida, your body's being exposed to higher levels of toxins just by the fact that you have this overgrowth issue. And that's a really big deal, let alone all the other things that come along with that. Parasites are extremely stressful on the body. Once again, we'll do another parasite episode, but like if you've got parasite overgrowth, super, super stressful on the body.
Yeah. I got caught on the parasite thing you said. In my head, I was like, oh, we should do an episode about when we all go through the full moon challenge. I'm sure that would be an interesting one. But
Yeah.
yeah, the yeast thing for Candida. I feel like at one point that was like the hot topic, kind of like parasites are now. But yeah, and again, I have personally not seen that like isolated alone. It's always coupled with something else. So I feel like that's part of why we don't solely, or you don't hear us talking solely about Candida that much, is because there's always something else that's going on in the body with that.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing, let's just throw this in here because I cannot stand this. Leaky gut is it's never just leaky gut. Just by the way, if you are working with someone and they are only addressing your leaky gut issues by trying to heal and seal your gut lining, like please run away so fast because your issues are gonna come back again and again and again. You're not the chances of you being able to heal long term by just focusing on your quote unquote leaky gut, which more technically we call intestinal permeability. It, you're not. You're
Ain't
just
gonna
not going to be able to
happen.
heal. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not
and
happening.
exactly. And if you have leaky gut, which if you have gut issues, you probably also have leaky gut. I mean, we've got to calm down your immune system. Like your immune system's reacting to lots of foods. If you have food sensitivities, chances are you have a gut overgrowth of some sort, along with leaky gut, along with probably some other stuff going on. Like, and so all of these things just rise up in this stress bucket and really pile on. And so you have to look at this because this is such a major factor. And if you don't address these gut issues and all of the reasons why and how they got there in the first place, once again, including, stomach acid level, like, yes, the leaky gut is valuable. Like, probably have some toxin overload issues. If not gonna lie, that's probably playing a role at some sort or some sort of dysfunction going on that's preventing your body from managing itself because these things should not happen. And so if we don't look at all of these things together, like you're picking such tiny little pieces out of your bucket, and it's not going to make a big difference.
Yeah. And again, like that, I love the stress bucket analogy because that's like pretty much what we try and do is just like slowly start taking pieces out to kind of empty that bucket. And then we kind of dive in and focus on some of the bigger stuff. And I feel like now might be a good time to go into some of that nervous system regulation, just
But
because that's such a huge piece. Go ahead.
yeah, but before we dive into that, I also want to talk about just like a couple other quick things. I just want to mention like some other stressors going on that yes, we need to look at. And often these don't come alone either. Chronic viral issues, Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme being two really big ones. But once again, these rarely come on by themselves. Almost always there's some other stuff going on as well as to why the immune system can't keep up and can't handle this. Other hormone, other hormone imbalances, sex hormone imbalances, PCOS is often talked about with cortisol dysregulation issues, estrogen dominance, low progesterone, the transition into like perimenopause and a menopause, like any other hormone imbalances. Yes, we also need to look at those. And once again, they're often not coming along by themselves. But yes, we need to look at all of these things to help the body internally before we talk about more mental and emotional side of things. We have to look at all of these things. And this is why we look at blood work. Like this is why we look at everything to full, like comprehensive symptom lists. Like we got to look at the whole picture together. So we take enough out of the bucket and keep enough out of the bucket that you don't end up back in that place. And that, for me personally, I just the amount of protocols I did, and I did deep dives when I finally figured out like I had heavy metal toxicity, parasite overload, Epstein-Barr virus. When I finally really addressed all of those things, like I felt a lot better. I didn't feel great. And it was because I had only started to dabble in this nervous system regulation piece, this trauma healing piece. And so this is also why we don't just focus on the physical body in our practice. This is why these two things, the physical body, mental and emotional body, like all of this goes so hand in hand because we've lived it. And once again, like I see people just focusing on nervous system regulation. Yes, super important, super valuable. It goes a long way. And I see people don't still not healing and still having issues because they have so much of this like other physical stressors going on that's filling up their bucket and keeping their bucket really full. And so this is why it's so important that we really have to look at everything all together.
Yeah. And on top of that too, like it's important to not do, like, I know here we are telling you all these great things that you can do, but another piece of this that's very important is to not try and do everything all at one time, because you're just going to kind of end up in the same place that you started. And you don't want to put
Exactly.
more stress on yourself. It's a slow process, starting with like one, two, maybe three changes, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, and I mean, healing from cortisol dysregulation, because there's so much involved here, it's not an overnight process. It is really a process to go through as we remove these things. And this is for us when we're working with someone in their healing journey. Our whole goal is, how do we reduce stress inside the body? How, inside and outside of the body. And there are some things we don't have any control over, and there's a lot of things we do. This is also why we're not super big on like strict elimination diets, or, you have to work out this way, or you have to make these lifestyle changes, because, what may be not stressful for one person may be incredibly stressful for another person. I can't tell you the number of people, especially moms, who come to me and I mean, chewing their food is such a challenge. It's so important. Like, look, it's so important to chew your food before you swallow it. But that lifestyle change for me, very simple. I don't have children. I set aside a time for me to like sit down and like fully eat my meals. And that's a thing that's really simple for me and my lifestyle. But for someone who, has a child, multiple children, who's busy, who's eating on the go, like that can be very challenging, and trying to slow down, while important, may also be incredibly stressful. So we have to take that all into account. And that's why it is so individualized, and is so different person to person.
Yeah, really important, or a big thing for us is just trying to meet people where you're at, because yeah, it's so different for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, let's dive into this nervous system regulation piece. And I do want to mention, just with nervous system regulation, before we go into all of the things that can impact our dysregulated nervous system. Nervous system regulation is not about never being stressed. It's not about always being happy or always feeling a certain way. It is none of that. Once again, if someone tells you nervous system regulation work is about like being all sunshine and butterflies like all of the time, and just like being carefree and being happy and being full of gratitude all of the time, oh, I real big question marks. A lot of red flags popping up for me, because it's not that's not what it is. That's not what it's about. And it's really about being able to manage stress coming back, being able to bring yourself back during these situations to a more regulated state, because we're always going to get dysregulated. Life is dysregulating, but can we come back into a more regulated state so that we can sleep, our digestion can be good, like all of these things that are so valuable and important when it comes to having a regulated nervous system.
Yeah. It's kind of like that toxic positivity. If you get that vibe, it's probably not what you want. And it's not easy to do this either. And, we've both experienced this, and I'm not going to lie, it takes a long time. It took me like realistically like 2 solid years to actually get the hang of this and understand. And, granted, what we were just talking about too ties into it, because sometimes it's really hard to regulate your nervous system if you have some of that underlying stuff going on, which is why it's important to address it. Or like that stored trauma factor. Like sometimes you got to start really, really slow. You can't just jump in with like meditations and all the things. Like it's really a learning curve, learning how to listen to your body and like recognize what you're feeling and kind of like where you're feeling it in your body, and all the things. It's just it's a slow process, but once you start to do it and keep doing it, that's the most important part, is to be consistent with it.
Consistency and just starting somewhere
Yeah.
is the most important. And for me, I think it took me longer than 2 years. I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
It
I'm
took
still
me,
working on it.
yeah, I mean, it's a forever, ever process kind of thing. And, in this moment, I'm in a very regulated state. I'll be sharing the reasons why, in a future episode here. Um, and yeah, I mean, it took me a really long time. And it really, for me, it was stages. It was like,
Yeah.
all right, I was regulated enough to be able to sleep through the night, to like have okay energy, to not need like all of the caffeine every single day. And not to feel just like something would like totally set me off, and I'd be thinking about it for hours, days, weeks. And so yeah, it is a slow process. So a lot goes into this. And Shannon, you mentioned stored emotions and stored traumas. And so I want to touch on this piece first. So there's when it comes to nervous system regulation, I've been talking a lot about two pieces of this. One is getting this trauma, getting these stored emotions out of the body, because it can cause actual disease, it can cause actual illness, dysfunction in the body. Couple resources if you're interested in this piece in particular, and how this impacts the body. There's a lot of information if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, anything like Chinese medicine, like acupuncture, does a lot with this. The body keeps the score. I don't remember the author off the top of my head, but this is a really good resource. It is a little outdated, but like full disclosure, but it is a really good resource. I also really like emotion code, body code information, and a lot of people who talk about somatic healing, somatic exercises, somatic movements, like those are all really good resources to dive deeper into this piece of it.
Yeah. And for the emotion code, body code portion, that's Dr. Bradley Nelson. He's got a lot of free resources on his website too, for like if you want to dive deeper into like, what organs hold on to what. And it's pretty interesting. And then of course there's his book, which I like the books. There's a lot of I feel like the majority of it is actually like different stories about his clients and whatnot, which if you're just getting into this, that can be really helpful. But yeah, in later in the book, it definitely dives deeper into actually how you can learn to do this on your own too, which is really awesome. However, I will say before, like it can be helpful to read about it, but maybe before jumping into that portion, if you're someone who doesn't feel very connected with yourself at all, the first thing that you have to do is kind of learn how to get connected with yourself before diving into anything like that.
Yeah, and once again, I worked with a lot of different types of practitioners when I started doing trauma healing, and I started my nervous system regulation in the trauma healing world. And no one really talked to me about this, and this is something I had to learn the hard way. And this is still, of all of the things, like something that I do still struggle with quite a bit, and I have to be very intentional about this, and really can still continue to make like some time to make sure I'm reconnecting with myself. And I know a lot of people are going to relate to this when I share like a little bit about this story. But growing up, I grew up with an alcoholic mom, a single parent. I had no siblings, like, and I was always just on the lookout. How is she reacting today? What is her mood? Like, where are we in the drinking situation at that moment? And always managing my emotions, my reactions, my mood based on that. So I stopped feeling feelings really young. I shoved them all down. I can remember so specifically, especially like starting in high school, and even like through college, through into my mid 20s, like how, like, being so proud of myself for not crying, for like, I don't feel feelings, like I don't feel that stuff. I just shove it all down. Like, how few feelings can I feel? And I was like, that was like a big win for me. And gosh, was that a huge part of making me sick? And was it so, I mean, once again, like it's still sometimes challenging for me to understand one, what am I feeling? What are emotions? And one of the resources I always recommend to clients is if you look at a feeling wheel, it's just like Google feeling wheel. And I know for some of you, this might sound silly, but for those of us who don't know how to feel or what feelings are and how they feel in our body, like this is a real challenging exercise. But like have that in front of you and then sit by yourself alone in the quiet, like in a room without distractions for 5 minutes. It will feel incredibly uncomfortable and awkward. It is okay. You'll be okay. And then look at this feeling wheel and just like try and identify one thing you're feeling. And what I like about a lot of these feeling wheels are is they start with like big emotions. It's like happy, and I don't have one in front of me, so I'm gonna butcher this probably a little bit, but like happy, anger, sadness, and then like it branches out like based on those big categories, like oh, are you angry? Are you actually frustrated? Are you actually feeling disappointed? Like it breaks it down into further categories. And this was a really valuable tool and resource for me to start to understand and break down like I'm angry. Okay, am I actually angry? Like how is that showing up for me? And anger is not something that is common for me. Anger will often show up when I'm repressing sadness or disappointment. And that like for me that's what that looks like. And so I know like if I'm immediately angry, especially about nothing seemingly in particular, I got to dive a little bit deeper and pull that feeling wheel back out and be like, okay, what am I actually feeling? Where is this coming from? So I can start to understand this a little bit better so that I can feel it, I can acknowledge it, and then I can find a way that it would like to be released from my body so it doesn't store it.
Yeah. And yeah, there's so much to this. I was also that child who I just was not taught how to deal with emotions. The only emotion that I had was anger. I was just so angry all the time. That's how everything came out as. So I can really, really relate to that. And I mean, I started therapy at a fairly young age. I want to say I was in like 8th grade. And that I think that was the first time I came across the feelings wheel, or like that's when it was shown to me. And I remember like kind of like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh my God, like there's all this. Like I thought this is all that I was feeling. Like yeah, as silly as it sounds, I mean, I still use it sometimes too when I'm like in a high stress state or just like am really having trouble connecting with myself. I'm like, all right, let's pull up the feelings wheel. Where am I at here? What's going on? And just like it's a way to kind of just dive in deeper and help you connect with yourself and identify what you're actually feeling. And then once you figure that out, it's it's kind of a good step to just like take a step back, take a couple breaths, and then ask yourself, like, what do I need from there? What can I do for myself?
Yeah. And once again, all of these are really step-by-step processes. Like just being able to feel really valuable. Then you can like, all right, well, where is this feeling showing up? Am I feeling it in my head, in my jaw, in my throat, like in my belly, in my heart? Like, where's this showing up? And then that may take a while to get used to. And then asking yourself, like, okay, well, how would this like to be expressed? Do I need to express this to someone? Do I need to cry? Do I need to be like, do I need to, hit a pillow? Do I need to dance? Do I need to scream? Like, then that can take another while. So don't feel like this is an all at once kind of thing. This is a real like weeks, months, years kind of
Yeah.
situation here. And if it is taking you such a long time, please don't be discouraged because it is challenging. It can take a very long time. Once again, I've been doing this work for a long time, about a decade at this point, and I also spent 10 years in therapy before that.
Yeah.
I started when I was 11 in therapy. 11 to 22 were my therapy years, anywhere between 1 to 3 times a week in therapy. So please don't get discouraged. Like it just trust the process, keep up with it. You'll figure it out. You'll get there.
Yeah. And I would say a good starting point is like I know we talked about some other things that are maybe a little bit deeper, but truly I feel like breath work is a pretty easy easiest thing to start with is just like trying to control your breathing because that has a huge effect on your body. And then just like those check-ins with yourself, like, the feelings wheel, where am I feeling it? What am I feeling? I would say those two things are like probably if you are not familiar with this at all, that those two things are like the best place for you to start.
Those are amazing. Those are amazing things. And there's so many free resources
Mhm.
on them. And it's not about like, you don't have to do like a 20-minute breathwork session. Do a 2 to 5 minute breathwork session. And as we've already mentioned, consistency is really important. So if you can do 2 minutes every day, man, it's really going to start to add up. You will not notice I mean, you may notice an immediate difference. Most people don't, but give it like 3, 4, 5 weeks and you will notice a significant impact. Meditation definitely on the table, and guided meditations are definitely going to be easier than sitting there and just trying to meditate. There's also walking meditations, which are really valuable, and really focus on just being present, which can be very helpful. Journaling, not a lot of people's things, my new thing. So we'll talk about that when we do another episode specifically on nervous system regulation and techniques to deeper dive into this. But journaling can be really valuable, especially if you're a writer. But yeah, there's a lot of techniques here. And then, yeah, you get into some other stuff, but the 2 to 5 minutes, start there, be consistent. You can always add more, but those are really good starting points.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And then do you want to dive into the workout piece or do you got anything else on
Real
that?
quick, yeah. So I talked about the two pieces of nervous system regulations. We talked about the somatic piece and getting this trauma, getting these emotions out of the body. Hugely important. Also, if you're only doing that, I have found for the vast majority of people, it is very challenging to see long and lasting changes, especially in habits, especially in trauma patterns. So, yes, valuable, and that's the only valuable thing. And I just, I, I, I think it's a mistake to only focus on that. Now, if you just start there, amazing, great. Think about this other piece here at some point, and that is your neural programming, aka what is your subconscious brain? Without you consciously thinking about things, what patterns, how do you talk to yourself? Like, what is going on in your brain? And we probably need to make some changes in how we're talking about ourselves and how we're thinking about ourselves and patterns that we're replicating, especially if you're in a chronic state of fight, flight, and or freeze. This is hugely important.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go ahead and say they go together. Like if you start on one, you're going to come to a head where you have to address this other stuff because they both have to be addressed.
Yeah.
That, yeah, especially like diving deeper into your subconscious and like these, not looping thoughts isn't the right word, but like those core wounds, like those that I'm not good enough, like that. And it takes a while to get to that. Like it's a dive to get there. And I don't know if we have any resources on the website listed on that, but we do have like a couple book recommendations and stuff that maybe we can link below. I'm thinking like Dr. Nicole LaPera or something like that. That's a great resource. But yeah, these go hand in hand. If you start regulating your nervous system with some breath work, eventually you're going to come to a point where it's got to go deeper than that. And that's this subconscious work that we're talking about right now.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in other episodes. I don't think we have any resources public. We have a lot of resources for clients in whatever capacity people work with us. We have quite a few resources, and it kind of depends on which lane someone's in, and how deep and when someone's ready to do this, that we share those. So yeah, we're gonna in probably our next episode we'll do a deeper dive into this, and some tools and resources in retraining your brain and neural reprogramming and neuroplasticity. So yeah, we'll talk about that in another episode, probably multiple
Awesome.
episodes. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive into movement here.
Okay. Workouts. Oh, this is such a touchy subject for everyone. So pretty much we have to remember that when we're doing so think about like I think we referenced this in one of our past episodes, but like when cortisol is high, for instance, like you can think about like if you're being chased after someone, like that initial like adrenaline response, like fight or flight, like your cortisol is spiking in that situation. So we want to try and avoid things that are going to add to raising your cortisol levels or just putting stress on your body in that manner. And one of those things is like high intensity workouts. So anything that is like getting your heart rate super high just isn't, it's going to do more damage than good when you're working on something like this. Um, you know, CrossFit, running, I would say those are like the two big things. HIIT workouts, anything along those lines. And Megan, you're more, you got the personal training side to this too. So I know you have a little bit more to say about this.
Yeah, I got a lot to say about this because this was also a big thing for me. I mean, I was a group instructor for a popular high intensity interval class. And I just when I really started to learn about this, and I was like, none of these people should be in my class. I should not be in my own class
Yeah.
because of all of these issues. And here's the thing, like these workouts have value. I'm also going to throw in hot yoga because I think
Yeah.
that is one that is really missed. And
Mhm.
not all yoga is created equal. Yoga is great, many different kinds of yoga. When you're in this healing process, a hot yoga or like a real intense kind of yoga flow class is not going to be your friend because it is very intensive. And so, you know, we just they and sorry, backtrack. Too many thoughts. They all have value,
Yeah.
but while we're healing, while we're in this healing process, we need to be aware, and we're probably going to need to take a little bit of a step back when you're in a more healed position. Yeah, these things are fine to incorporate, assuming your stress bucket has enough space to handle this. So, yes, there are health benefits to all of these things. Um, and while you're healing with these issues, probably not going to be helpful. And they can really set you back long term if you continue with them. So, yeah, general recommendations kind of while you're in the actual healing process, heart rate needs to stay low. You should be able to have a very easy conversation while you are doing any sort of movement. Walking, a gentle yoga practice, strength training, once again, where the heart rate stays low and you're able to maintain that kind of level conversation, low impact cardio, Pilates, once again, assuming you can keep your heart rate low and keep up this conversation. And then short, 20 or 30 minutes is probably going to be a good starting point. If you're starting from not moving at all, start with like a 5 or a 10-minute walk, like real easy, real basic. This is not the time to actively push your body to lose weight through a caloric deficit and or extra movement. Your body will not respond because losing weight is a stressor. It is not a bad idea by any stretch for the vast majority of people who are struggling with weight. Now we also need to look at body image issues. Like there's a lot
That's
of
what I
other
was
going
gonna
on there.
say.
Yeah, a lot of other factors going on here. But if you're in a place and you have some excess weight, not saying weight loss is bad because it's not. Wanting to transform your body for the right reasons is not bad. Wanting to include your increase your physical performance, totally fine. And this is probably not the time to do that because it is stressful. Being in a caloric deficit, not giving your body the calories it needs, is a stressor on your body. These intense physical things is a stressor on the body. It is a good stressor, but once again, if your stress bucket is overflowing, it cannot handle even a good stressor. So let's take it down a notch. And then just reevaluate when you're in a more healed position. I will also say, even when I was like healed, I had to be super mindful of my workouts and look like I am consistently in the gym at least twice a week. I have been for well over a decade at this point. It is a happy place for me. I like working out. I like to lift heavy things. I love to strength train. Like it is a very happy place for me. It is also the reason I was able to get off of all of my anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications. So like yes, from a physical standpoint, it also helped me get rid of all my chronic pain issues, my low back and hip issues. Um, and I mean, it took me a long time to be able to get back to an hour-long workout. And one of the telltale signs that we see here is if you work out, I'll actually give you two. If you work out and you feel more exhausted afterwards or pretty shortly afterwards, your workout was too much. Actually, I'm gonna give you three. Sorry, I just keep thinking of more. If you struggle with sleep the night after your workout, especially if you have a hard time falling asleep and or waking up right around that like 2:30 to 3:30 time frame, it was too much. That's your cortisol spike, that's your adrenaline spike going on. And if you're super sore after a workout, it was too much. So please just be very mindful of all of those things, especially right after you're like early in your healing stages. I also use that as a marker for how much stress my body can handle. And if I do a workout and I wake up at like 3 a.m., I know that it was too much and I need to take a couple weeks probably and back off my workouts a little bit and just do something a little bit less intense. Not that I can't work out, I just need to be a little bit more intentional about taking the intensity down a little bit so that my body can handle and recover and I'm not pushing myself towards overflowing my bucket again.
Yeah. And I know that this is like kind of a hard thing to hear. It's just so against like what the rest of the world I feel like is saying, and it can be super confusing when you're hearing like all these different things. As I'm saying that, did we talk about fasting in the first half? Because I feel like that's a big part of this.
I don't think so. We let's touch on it real quick. If you can't guess, don't fast.
Yeah. It's just if you're in this state, especially if you have like any cortisol issues, like fasting is essentially just going to raise like the stress response on your body, and it's going to do all the same things that we're talking about. Pretty much make it so you can't be able to heal. It's just when it's like starving yourself. Like your body needs food for fuel, and that is going to help along the healing process. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there really quick. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
fast. That's not a good time for that. But yeah, and with the workouts, like, I mean, I'm going to be honest here. I know, Megan, you're in the gym more than I am. I'm not even back to that point yet. And it's been like 4 years for me because I'm just part of a yoga studio. I participate in only the slow classes because that's what feels good for me. I just do like regular mobility, like movements or stretching and walking. And yeah, it's really different for everyone. And I think you'll know too. Like when I'm trying to think when we work with clients, there comes a point towards the end where they're like, okay, I can really tell. Like I'm almost craving movement. I'm ready to get back out there and try something else. And it may be different than what you came from or what you let go of, but there's still plenty of things you can do to get movement in. It just doesn't always have to be so intense.
Yeah, exactly. And your body will thank you. And your body will respond better when it's not overstressed by the workout piece. And so this is a nice segue into maintenance. And here's the thing, when it comes to maintaining this, it's really about managing this stress load. So, for me, like just talking about workouts, when I am under a lot of stress for any reason, my workouts are one of the first things that I back off on. And maybe I'll shorten my workout sessions to closer to like 30, 45 minutes. I'll really decrease the weight, decrease the intensity. I also like prioritizing sleep. Like if I'm not sleeping well, I dial in things a little bit more. Nutrition, I try and eat as clean as I can and get lots and lots of good nutrients to fuel my body. Certainly we'll talk about supplements here, but making it like doubling down on my evening routine to like make sure I have enough time that I can decompress from the end of the day so that I can get good sleep. Not fasting, making sure I'm eating breakfast within about 30 to 60 minutes of waking up, making sure I get out and see the natural light in my eyes, especially first thing in the morning, but even just as much as I can throughout the day, really, really valuable. If you work night shifts, having a sun lamp may be a valuable resource for you if you're struggling with a lot of these things. Watching the caffeine intake, definitely no caffeine before you've eaten breakfast and just being very mindful of total intake and how late you're drinking it in the day. Really, really helpful. Making sure, I know for so many people, as soon as stress increases, all the mindfulness activities go right out the door. And that's like the first thing that goes out the door. But really making sure, like, once again, 2 to 5 minutes, making sure you're making time. Listen, like you have 2 minutes. You can find 2 minutes to like sit with yourself, do some breathing. We all have 2 minutes in a day. Do it while you're in the bathroom. Like you can find a time. I promise you can.
I
Um,
heard a saying from someone, and they pretty much said, like, if you can't find 5 minutes for yourself in the day, you have much bigger problems to think about. Like 2 to 5 minutes, it's doable.
yes, exactly. So doing these things, making sure your water's on point. Um, I don't know if you have any other basics from a maintenance standpoint.
No, I mean, I feel like you pretty much covered them all, or just like I feel like just taking breaks throughout the day too to check in with yourself. You don't always have to be doing something. Like, yes, journaling is great, meditations are great, but if you can just like pull yourself aside for a second, just take a couple deep breaths, like that's good enough too. I mean, we are well aware that when you're super stressed out or like have a lot going on, it's sometimes harder to add things to your plate to do. So just like take a step back. I think that's a big one in really prioritizing sleep. It's just like, and even if you need supplementation during that time, do it because sleep is so important.
Yeah, so a couple of things that it's a little bit build a little list here of things we always have on hand, especially when stress increases. So sleep support, magnesium glycinate, always a giant bottle in my house. Cortisol manager is good to have. I don't respond well to ashwagandha, so I don't take it, but it is something I would generally recommend as a good resource. I use a full spectrum hemp oil that is a specific sleep blend. It is from Hello Ned. I'm a huge fan of theirs. Their product got rid of my nerve pain immediately, so I will forever be super grateful for them. And I love, love, love their sleep blend. So that is always in my house. I have another supplement called Best Rest Formula that is always in my house. Um, yeah.
Cortisol manager is my big one. Oh my God, that thing's like a lifesaver for me. And
Yeah.
magnesium glycinate. And then I would also say the L-theanine and GABA.
Yes.
That's a big one too. And especially because you can take that one throughout the day. It doesn't like make you dead tired. You can take it just to help manage stress throughout the day, but you can also take it at night and it may help with sleep a little bit.
Yeah. I'll throw another one in there. Emotional wellness
Oh, yeah.
is another really good one, especially if you're dealing with a lot of emotional stress, a lot of like big change going on. That can be a really valuable tool. It will help with sleep, but it also like has a lot of other really great herbs and other products in there that can just are very supportive of overall relaxation of the body.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid list. I would say those are the main things that we recommend and keep on hand for high stress situations.
Yeah, and the other big piece for me that I'm thinking of is digestion. I always have HCl with pepsin on hand. I have a history of all kinds of gut issues, low stomach acid issues, and as soon as stress rises, naturally our stomach acid levels drop, and this can lead to gut overgrowth issues, among many other things. So anytime I'm under a lot of stress, even if honestly, if I eat a meal just and I'm on the go and I don't have time to like sit down and like enjoy my meal and chew it and all that kind of stuff, I always take it just as a preventative measure. I never want to have to go through what I went through before to get rid of my gut issues. So that's a big thing. I also have digestive enzymes ultra. I think that's pure encapsulations. That's another one I always have on hand that if stress increases, I'm just for some bigger meals, oftentimes I'll take those for a few days while under the higher stress.
Yeah, same. I'm glad you brought that up because that is a big piece. It's just the first thing in your body that is very easy to get thrown off balance. So we want to make sure we can kind of keep that on track. And that's why supplements are great because it's really easy to just take an HCl with enzymes and then, you're good to go.
Exactly. And then the last thing, and this could go supplement or other way, is liver support.
Oh yeah.
Just, I'll increase castor oil pack use if I can. I'm a big bath person. Like I'll take more baths with Epsom salt in it. And then I have always a couple liver supporting supplements on hand. My go-to is TEDCA. There's one by Body Bio, and then we often use a company called Cellcore. Cellcore is a little bit stronger in my opinion. So I always have that on hand, and I'll often start to take that especially if it's been like a week or so and I'm like, oh, the stress is high and it's probably going to continue for another week or more. Probably going to add that in, not at full dosages, but at least a half dose or a quarter dose to make sure my liver's getting a little bit more support.
Yeah. And there's some basic ones too. I would say like, dandelion root. There's actually a supplement called Biomin that is, it's for bile support, but actually, if you look at the ingredients, it's much for liver support as well. And that can also be a good one too.
Yeah, so just little things to add in there. And life happens, and the more you can be prepared, the better off you're gonna be. So yeah, those are kind of our recommendations. And for me, like I've been able to maintain pretty consistent cortisol levels after being so dysregulated for so long by using a lot of these strategies. And look, like I'm not perfect, it's not perfect. Yeah, I've like fallen into bad patterns and but I've also been able to get out quite quickly, which is really the name of the game here is like when these things happen in life, because once again, life happens here. How quickly can you bounce back and how can you support your body during that so you don't fall into massive dysregulation issues?
Yeah, that's the name of the game. That's the biggest piece is just like, that's the shift that you'll see is, oh, okay, it only took me maybe a day or two to kind of feel normal again, as opposed to months. So yeah, just do what you can, be super gentle on yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that's high cortisol part 2. So thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this was super helpful. Be sure to go listen to part 1 if you didn't listen to part 1. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe. We are a brand new podcast. So if you can leave us a 5-star review, it really, really helps us. And we really, really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.